So I'm standing here today at the recreation of Fort George in Ontario, Canada. The fort was built starting in 1796 after the conclusion of the treaty ending the Revolution, the American Revolution, where the British ceded the Fort Niagara, which we see off in the distance, across the Niagara River here, which goes behind us here, all the way up to Lake Ontario to the north. And if you kept trucking down the Niagara River to the south at the British-built Fort Erie. The Niagara River was key to the defense and the commerce and movement of troops and people and so on during this period of the late 1700s, early 1900s, and the British built this fort to protect their landownings in this part of the Niagara frontier. In 1812, when the United States declared war on Britain to try to push into Canada and take territory, as well as they were contesting some trade issues, as well as the impressment of sailors into use in the Napoleonic War, which was raging in Europe at the time. The invasion into Canada started in 1812 with the failed battle to the south of here in 1812, where a lot of American soldiers were pushed back at the Battle of Queenston Heights by a more disciplined but smaller force of British forces. American did not have a standing army at the time, and so it was all volunteers, and they were not as well trained. There wasn't a good command structure and so on. The British hold this area until 1813, when the Americans finally, using a variety of bombardment, either from Fort Niagara across the way, flotillas of gunships, and then an invading force, take over Fort George. They occupy it until December of 1813. When they decide to leave this, they burn here and the town, which is made up of local Canadians as well as loyalists who had fled post-American Revolution into this part of Canada. Taxes were lower, there were land grants. It was a little friendly to people who had stayed loyal to the crown, and they weren't finding it as comfortable living in the new United States. So this recreation is from the early 20th century, the 1930s, I believe. There are these three gray recreated barracks where the hundreds of British soldiers would have been at the time, as well as between these barracks in the distance here, some yellow, very nice officers' quarters, which were much more like what they were used to living in Europe. It's a great recreation of a fort of this era, with these palisaded walls, these different berms, these redoubts. There is a surviving stone powder magazine, which is the last building actually that dates from this period. But if you're interested in colonial war architecture and forts from this period, it's a really great example for the 1812 and anything else from this era.